You could even do it live in the studio too, and have people calling in. And yeah, it's an interesting prospect. But yeah, okay, all right. So sorry for that. Take it away, Yusuf.
All right, welcome. Welcome. Welcome to Activist San Diego's Community Forum. And today we're honoring Black History Month. And Black History Month, thank you. The title or theme of today's presentation is A Long Road Has Passed, A Long Road Ahead. Because we know it's a constant struggle, no matter what group or subgroup you come from, that it will be a long struggle in any group. And that's including the African-American situation that has been going on actually since the 1500s. So here in this Western hemisphere. So we still have a long road to go, and we're going to expound on what we're talking about with a few presentations. You're also going to have some entertainment with music and dance. So we made this into a very full event. And also you can see the food, and a lot of you are enjoying the food that we have in the back there. And even with her thought of the brother, you know, being Muslim, I don't eat pork. So one of my friends, she brought in macaroni and cheese without bacon in it, and one with bacon. So you can have the bacon, but don't overuse the non-bacon, because I want some of that one. I want some of that one. Just kidding with you guys. Enjoy and have as much as you can. We as Activists San Diego, we do this all the time. We're welcoming you and glad to see your faces, but we don't want to make it a one-off or once in a while. I see a few new faces, not many. A lot of us are friends and we already know each other, but we want to expand this and make sure that people are coming to our community forums, because we always talk about something that impacts us as a community and impacts us as a nation and impact us as the world. So please continue to spread the word and join us for all the functions that we have. Another thing, Activist San Diego is always involved in community events, no matter what it is. So when it comes to indigenous rights, we're there. When it comes to LGBTQ rights, we're there. When it comes to Black rights, we're there. When it comes to women's rights, we're there. When it comes to Palestine, we are there. When it comes to Syria, when it comes to Africa, we are there. So when we talk about how to motivate the people, bring them together, whether in politics or in social movements on the ground that impacts the community, we are the community. So we're here to help guide and organize and do rallies and protests and things right from the grassroots. And that's what we've been. We are in our 25th year of existence, 25 years of doing this. Now, I wasn't the ED at that time. But a lot of people here were here from the beginning that are here, that was joining us for 25 years. So we've been doing this work. With issues that deal with the Tijuana River. You see our footprint there. Issues that are dealing with the border and the mass deportation, you'll see us there. Issues that are dealing with fair housing, you'll see us there. The racism in the schools that are plaguing San Diego County, especially on the coastal schools, but everywhere, you'll see us there. And the erasure and the oppression of indigenous communities, you'll see us there. So with that being said, I want to welcome everybody again, and thank you for showing up to Activist San Diego. Welcome to our program, and I'm going to kick the program off by turning it over to a great brother and friend of mine, Brother Clovis Honore. Now, Clovis Honore, he's a polymath, actually. And not only is he great in history, he's also great in the spiritual realm, where he is part of many interfaith traditions, interfaith for earth justice, interfaith for so many things. You'll find him always working across the aisle to make sure that we work for the better good. And he's just a righteous brother when it comes to Black liberation, brown liberation, and issues that deal with people of color in this nation from a very practical way that we can understand and we can incorporate into our lives. I want to introduce and bring up to the front Brother Clovis Honore.
Don't forget when I'm speaking. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so I don't know what he was talking about. Good evening. Let's start this way. let's all together take a very deep breath. And relax. The first thing I want to point out to you are the books that are sitting on the chair over there. And if you would be so kind as to begin passing those books down the rows so that people can take a look at them. One at a time is fine. You could just take the first one, take a look at it. Two things about these books. One, there are 7 of them, I believe. They're from my personal collection, not somebody's library. And if there are not all 7 of them sitting in that chair or some chair, nobody leaves the room till I get my books back. Second thing about those books is no computer, no AI, no social media, no news outlet will ever change the words that are in those books. Because if you noticed online, things change. The titles of things change, the names of things change, and some other things change. So books are very important. I also wanted to compliment this meeting and that you chose 2 men of faith to make presentations to you today, because that's what this is going to be all about with me. I'm going to trip over this before the 9 is out, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm going to trip over it anyways. No matter what you do, I'm going to trip over it. And I think it's also very important that we recognize the critical importance of the divine feminine. Now, I happen to know Miss Kiyomi Tarver, and I happen to know that she brings that divine feminine with her, and you will see that in her presentation today. But let us not neglect or forget or push to the side or minimize the critical importance of the divine feminine. Now, I was supposed to start my timer because I'm a Black Baptist preacher. He got me already. I'm going to start that one. And then when the table starts vibrating. All right. I want to do my second thing is a little piece of poetry. Let's do this the way Black folk do this. Right? We don't just lecture and talk. There's always some art in what we say, what we think, and what we do, right? Now, this one, I hope some folks will recognize this. We're talking about a long road behind us, a long road past. And this is a piece called The Negro Speaks of Rivers. It is written by some old guy named Langston Hughes. It comes out of a period we call the Harlem Renaissance. Now, I'm not a poetess. I'm not a poet, that person. I just read. I've known rivers. I've known rivers as ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when the dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like rivers. And that is an ode to our title today, Long Time Past, Long History Past. Black history is the history of the world, is the history of humanity. And it's recognized by Langston in this poem. There's also a more recent history that I want to share with you in poem from Langston Hughes also. It's called I Too Sing America. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. Now, there's thousands of pieces of poetry that we could share with you that try to express who we are and who we've been since time immemorial. We call this Black History Month. Of course, you also know it started as Negro History Week, Carter G. Woodson, and all them good things. If the current president has his way in his regime, remember that word regime, if he and his regime, including the illegal individual who seems to be trying to completely reconstruct the United States of America himself, all by himself, without any legal authority to do so, with any constitutional authority to do so. If they have their way, there not only wouldn't be no Negro History Week or Black History Month, there'd be no Black people or any people of color in the United States of America, which we as Black people find kind of funny. Because one, we was here before they was here. And two, they wouldn't have nothing they got if it wasn't for us. And that's just the start. I mean, this is Black History Month. We only have 20 minutes. What, I got 10 minutes left after doing the poetry? So here's what I want to share with you that I think is critically important in my disposition, my dispensation. And there is, I don't think any of y'all will get this one, but I need to do this. Nukhekau pui abemrei hati ra netru heriwati imrei nukra ia ut nukba fe hekau imren wisser imren heru imren aishat. This speaks from the Medu language, which some of y'all call hieroglyphics, from an ancient place called Kemet, that some of y'all call Egypt, right? Spanish is not the word for Spanish. Español, right? Spanish is an English word for somebody else's language. Neither do we come from Egypt, and we don't write no hieroglyphics. We have our own language and our own name, and we have our own writing system, and we have our own name for it. These phrases I just shared with you are actually what we call a spell or a prayer. And it articulates our origins, our spiritual origins on this planet. And as I look around the room, I find it interesting that all y'all come from the same place I come from. I mean, think about it. How many of y'all have a mother and a father who had a mother and a father and had a mother and a father, mother and father? Somewhere back in ancient history, we talk about long time past, right? Somewhere back in ancient history, who knows about all the anthropological pieces, but somewhere two members of the same species came together. And at some point, they joined together and made another member of the same species that was 50% one, 50% the other. So the new species was not something, the new person was not a new species, was not a unique individual. It was a combination of the first two individuals. One time I called my son a mini me. He got real mad. So I got my own destiny. I'm my own person. I'm like, dude, you literally, every cell in your body is half mine. Literally half mine. And that has gone on for generation to generation to generation to generation, till that same two people who created one more person, and of course, many more persons, came down to all these people. We are not 8 billion individual people on this planet. We are 8 billion cells in one living being. If we grasp that concept deeply enough, if we inculcate that in our thinking, in our ethos, we begin to realize that even Donald Trump and Elon Musk are brothers. They're members of the body, are they not? Right? Now, there are some philosophies that say there might be some other species on the planet that I haven't figured that out yet. But even with that, we understand this. Every cell, there's 10 trillion cells in your body. Every cell in your body is not trying to work its own world out. Its existence is to serve the body. Every cell. And the cells that get out of hand, the cells that get out of line and start doing their own thing, what do we call those? Cancer. But the body, so I used to be president of an organization called San Diego Black Health Associates. I'm also currently the chair of the board of the Alliance Health Clinic. Now, I don't have a healthcare background. I didn't train all that, but I had all the experts. And I had to review and all the stuff that they did, right? Coming across my desk. The body is structured such that, given the right environment and resources, it will heal everything. Absolutely. Okay. The earth has already given us everything we need, right? I mean, just think about it. How much time I got left? Because I got so much I want to say. I ain't gonna get to it. Okay. Think about this planet. Okay, here's another. I'm just throwing some concepts out at you that I hope that you will use to reorient, reconstruct, unless you're already there, reorient, reconstruct your thinking so that we begin to move in a different direction than the one we've been moving in, which has brought us to this moment, right? The earth. gives us everything we need. Everything you've ever eaten came from the earth. Right. As a human being on this planet, we have homelessness in this country, which is an abomination. Every human being needs at least 5 things: air, water, food, clothing, and shelter. Right? In your physical. Now, there's some things spiritual I could talk to you about that we're not going to get to because we don't have time. I started with that. If you can grasp that and move with that, you'll get to that. But every human physical body needs air, water, food, clothing, and shelter. Well, where does the air come from? Where does air come from? The plants. Where are the trees? Where are the plants? Are they floating around in the sky? Do they come out of the space? They're all built in the earth. Right? Water. How much of this planet is covered with water? 75%. What percent of that water can you actually drink? But somewhere between, depending upon the season, somewhere between 1% and 3%. Can't drink. There's a phrase: water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. Anybody in the Navy? Ever in the Navy? Water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. You can be surrounded by trillions of gallons of water on an ocean, and you can't drink any of it. It will kill you. You must find your water where? On the land, in a river, in a lake, in a stream, in a well, right? So air, water. I don't have to tell you about food. Everybody knows food grows in the ground. How about the shelter? Anybody got wood in their house? Anybody got stones in their house, like concrete, masonite, and all that stuff? Where does that come from? And your clothes, earth. Everything you need and every chemical in your body comes from this earth. And its design is to help you. You do not have to scream and holler at Mother Earth for it to grow food. America by itself grows more food every year than the whole planet can eat. So starvation is not Mother Earth's responsibility or Father Earth's responsibility, depending upon your perspective. So I say all this to say, we need to rethink the way we think about who we and what we are, so that we can reconnect to each other. Right? We don't need you don't need religious people who have taken these concepts and organized them so you can understand them better and utilize them more efficiently to connect you to other human beings. You're already connected. Now, hopefully one day we'll have a conversation about quantum physics. All right? Because we use terms. How much time I got? Okay. Do we have enough time for quantum? We definitely got enough time for quantum physics. Okay. Where am I going? We talk about spirituality. And what is that? And y'all know that when in so-called Enlightenment period, that when folks were starting to learn about what we now call sciences, that what they were seeking was understanding of God. One of the challenges of this culture, there's a book called Destruction of Black Civilization going around. It's right there. And it talks about, it says issues of a great issues of a race from 4,500 BC to 2000 AD. And this is written in the 1970s. And it postulates that we have throughout history, and again, if you look at indigenous people around the world, not just here, around the world, we're connected to the earth and we're connected to the spirits of the earth. And we're connected to spirits that help create this earth. And I know you Christians and Muslims and some others are like spirits, gods. There's a crisis of nomenclature, an old preacher once told me. Crisis of nomenclature. What do I mean? I was in a meeting, Serna, where'd you go? As she knows, I'm also on the Commission on Police Practices. And we were in our retreat last month. And we were talking about what are the things we think we need in order to be a cohesive and functional group of people. And folks were talking about we need honesty, we need transparency, blah, 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 all that stuff. Somebody said spirituality. Now, the guy that was doing it, transparency, he wrote that down. Oh, we need honesty, we wrote that down. What else we need to wrote that down. Spirituality, he paused. And I'm watching him. Because I didn't say spirituality, but I knew what the person was talking about. And he said, and folks, long story short, since I only have 10 minutes, folks in the room were saying, well, we don't want to deal with religion. We don't want to bring that into the room. And I had to say, wait. Nobody in the room said anything about religion. We said spirituality, right? And I said, just to put a fine point on it, as an aerospace engineering major at San Diego State University, I didn't finish that, but I started there. We talk about quantum physics, and we ask the question, what ties us together? Anybody like Avatar, The Last Airbender, not the blue people, Avatar, The Last Airbender, right? And Avatar, I'm not gonna go into the whole thing. Y'all can explain it to him later, those of you who know. Avatar, actually, he's Asian. We're not sure if he's Chinese, Japanese, Korean. They don't pull that out. But he does go to an Indian guru to get some wisdom. And it's a fascinating story. Y'all should watch it. Not the movie ones, the cartoon series, if you can find it these days. You got to pay for it. The short version of for that section is it says everything's connected. This is the Avatar. This is the guy who's supposed to save the world. This guy's got he's got connection to all the spirit world. He's got connection to all the powers of the spirit world. He's 12 years old. Now, there's a long story that goes into that, why he's 12 and why he's the Avatar. But he has to learn, to save the world, he has to learn some things. The thing he learns is everything's connected. And that's what quantum physics tells us. Anybody familiar with quantum physics? Y'all know what I'm talking about then, right? Y'all know that quantum physics says that every thought that we're having right now, we're all thinking together. And so we're all the rest of the 8 billion on the planet. And so we're all the rest of the 8 trillion or 20 trillion or 100 trillion galaxies. It's all connected. And if we can orient ourselves to the place where we recognize them, every person you pass in the street is connected to you. Every person you see on TV is connected to you. Every person you hear on the radio is connected to you. Everything you see in here is all connected. And if we can deepen that connection within ourselves, then we can solve the problems that we have. I mentioned earlier the divine feminine. One of the great powers of the divine feminine is that life originates within the divine feminine. I don't have to tell you women that, right? Life originates within the divine feminine. So the divine feminine never disconnects. But when you let men run things, we have a hard time figuring it out, right? We do not carry life within us for 9 months. Y'all hear me? Life. We talk about miracles. Life within you. And this is the last thing I'll say before I sit down. When that life is within you, whoever might be carrying life, you are the mother. You are providing all its nutrition. Everything you eat, it eats. Every emotion you experience, the baby experiences, right? Every trauma and stress that you undergo, the baby undergoes. But you take care of that baby for 9 months. It's alive. And I'm not getting into all these political issues. That's not what I'm talking about. What happens when the baby is born? What do we call this earth? Mother Earth. So what happens when the baby's born? Somehow, now we could go into politics. We could go into social, what's that? Social psychology, all of that. We can go to all that stuff. What happens when the baby is born and is transferred from one mother to the next? Somehow, somewhere between that birth and that baby's death, we have come to the conclusion we no longer need to take care of that baby. That life outside the womb is not as valuable as a life inside the womb. That it doesn't need to eat. It can starve to death. That it doesn't need a warm place to be. It can be homeless. That it doesn't need nurture and care. How do we come to that conclusion? Who taught us that lie? What is this concept of rugged individualism, of self-sufficiency? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, even if I took your bootstraps from you. Not to mention your boots and your socks, right? And maybe even broke your knees. Rugged individualism is that baby is born, you cut the cord, you lay the baby on the ground, and you walk away. That's true, right? If you want to take it to its logical extreme, rugged individualism, this idea that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that you're all alone and have to do it by yourself, that it's up to you, is a bold-faced lie. Because if that was the case, if you really believe that, when your baby is born, you cut the cord, you lay it on the ground and run away. It's like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, baby. Right? You're an individual. You got to do this by yourself. And how long would the baby last? How long does any of us last when we're disconnected from each other? And so we have to figure out how to reconstruct those connections that were taken from us by our schools, in many cases by our churches, by our politics, by our media. Everybody's telling us, let me say that correctly because I don't like doing that myself. Most of the folks around us have been telling us since the day we were born, you got to do it by yourself. You can't, you take a test, don't cheat, look on somebody else's, right? You can't, that you have to do it by yourself. That's a lie. It never has been the case, right? Any of y'all live in houses? Any of y'all build your own house? Any of y'all got electricity in your house? Did you lay your own wires? Any running water in them houses? How many of y'all laid the pipes? Got internet? Can't even figure out how it works, right? And a lot of times it don't work, right? And then you got to call somebody else to help. Right? So Black History Month reminds us that Black people, I have to say one more thing because I was listening to Gwen Ifill. Y'all know who Gwen Ifill is? All right. A friend of mine sent me a link to her, a statement she made at the AME church, and I was watching it on the way over here. And she said, no, what's interesting is that you have a Constitution of the United States of America, and there's 3 amendments in it. 13, 14, 15. Y'all know what those are. If you don't know, research that. They are the only amendments in the entire Constitution of the United States that are aimed at a particular group of people. Black people. Anybody heard of due process? You only have it because of Black people. Before us, there was no 14th Amendment that was put in there to make sure that we would get due process, and it applies to everybody. There's my 20 minutes. Wow, perfect timing. I was just about to wrap it up. But since, yeah, watch. Well, I will close with that right there. Black History Month, Black people, long road behind us. I got 2 more before I go. 1 more minute. Long road ahead. Let me tell you who the road ahead is for. It's not for Black people. It's for everybody else. Here's what I tell folks. Last thing. What war cost us the most American lives? The Civil War. Anybody know approximately how many lives we lost? How many? Double that. Somewhere between 600,000 and 700,000 Americans lost their lives in the war called the Civil War. What percent of those were white people? Damn near all of them. This current Civil War you are in, while it's polite, more or less, I mean, Donald Trump ain't never polite, but while it's relatively polite right now, Black folks, brown folks, Asian folks, for the most part, ain't got nothing that they want. They want what you got. Somebody mentioned the Occupy movement earlier. They want what you got. They want white liberal power, because that's the check on their power. They want white economic power, because that's a check on their power. Right? The next Civil War, like the last Civil War, I tell Black folks this, I said, look, pour you some cognac, fire up a joint, lock the door, lock and load your Glock, sit back and watch TV. The revolution will be televised. And Black folk won't be in it. Let that be a prophetic warning to you. If it gets to that place, who's going to be on the battlefield? Just like the last Civil War. All right? So I love y'all. That's probably not a great spot to stop. Connect to each other and love each other. Let me do 2 things. I'm sorry, I got it. What is a friend? A friend is someone who does and encourages you to do that which is in your best interest. And love is the unconditional commitment to the welfare of the other. love each other, and be each other's friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clovis. All right. And now, and I'm Frances, Yasmin Motiwala, she, her pronouns. Thank you all again for being here today. Thank you also for everyone who was out this morning and then stuck with it and are here today too. That's amazing. I want to give you a couple dates to put in your phone, little upcoming events to note. This is our Activist San Diego's monthly community summit, we call it, where we pick a different topic each month and we go deep with special guests. The next one is going to be, and it's always the third Monday of every month. So today's February 17th. Next month, it falls on March 17th. Very convenient. Something else to put in your calendar. Thursday, February 27th, there is going to be a Zoom webinar at noon, and it's with Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, which is we're part of that national alliance. That webinar is going to have international allies from countries where they've had to fight off dictators and authoritarians in the past. And they're going to be sharing their wisdom and experience with us because now it's our turn. So on the next day, February 28th, Friday, there's a global strike, a call for everyone to not spend money that day. Earlier today, we decided that we're all going to go hang out in Balboa Park together that day and bring picnics and not spend any money, but organize together. So keep an eye out. You can keep an eye out for these things on activistsandiego.org, our website. We are thinking through a sort of a revision to make it more accessible and easier and updating our community calendar and things like that. So stay tuned. But the 28th, blackout day. We are also on Instagram. That is a good place if you are on it. Just follow us at Activist SD because it is where we're posting a lot of things quickly. That is, I think, enough for now. And it is my super huge privilege to introduce you to dear friend and sister Kiyomi Tarver and her dance company. And are you guys going to want the microphone or are you guys going to? Okay.
And her skin plays with the sun and dances with God. She gave her this blossom to teach her how to love her bud, to show her how to own her bloom, to show her how to plant herself, reminding her who she belongs to. She owes no one a reveal. Her bloom does not belong. Don't ask her to open just so you can see. Don't ask her to open because you lack faith. She only opens for the sake. She spreads where love and light is present. She knows she is the harvest and does not play when it comes to her nourishment. She opens with rain. She opens with water. She will open if you are worthy. And who more worthy to experience all of this bloom than her? Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Black History Month. Give me a cup of that. My name is Kelly Tarver. I'm an artistic holistic healer. I'm a choreographer. I'm a dancer. I'm a friend. And with me, I have the honor of having Aaliyah. Can you clap for Aaliyah? And we have Monique over here. We have a performance called Black Girl Bloom, where we have Black women telling their own stories through dance, through poetry, through theme press. Yeah. And really grateful to be here. But I actually also want to talk about the Black women who are no longer here. I want to talk about the Black women who were taken from us due to police brutality, domestic violence, or systems that were created to dismantle Black women. I want to talk about the sun-kissed flowers who were taken from us way too soon. To the sun-kissed flowers picked too soon. Even though many of us are still planted, know that we always feel your uproot. Us, sun-kissed flowers, picking. Us, sun-kissed flowers, know that our coils can lead us to pray. When a flower is pulled because of how the sun danced on it, the entire garden can feel it. Pickers have no idea how far the roots go. Pickers will call it everything other than what it is. We'll blame the flower for what part of town it grew in. We'll only see the flower from where it's planted. We'll look at its roots, declare it more frightening, fruitful, Brianna Taylor. We say your name because you should be. Sandra Bland, we say your name because it could very well be our own. Corinne Gaines, we say your name because we don't. They will call you everything but a flower. Sun-kissed flowers are getting melanin as a reminder to be our own photosynthesis. We must look to ourselves when others choose to look away. We must look to ourselves to create the soil that we grow best in. What courage it takes to grow anyway. What strength it takes to dream in gardens that do not value your bloom. What resiliency it takes to be beautiful fields that only like your petals when it's on them. Do they ever think about the morning song that we sing at every faith talk? Do they ever think about the branches that are connected to us? Do they ever think about our seeds before they pluck? Who will water these streams? Who will prune these babies? Who will console our mothers? Why are we not allowed to bloom? Natasha McKenna, you should be here. Dominique Fell, you should be here. Tia Boy, you should be here. Ayana Morgan, you should be here. All of these flowers taken too soon should be here. Who protects us while we are busy protecting everyone else? Where's our fence? Where's our greenhouse? Where are our protectors? We didn't ask to be daughters of the sun. This melanin is supposed to just capture the eye. This beauty should be admired from afar. Why rip us from the ground, from our cars, from our clothes? Why are we not safe in our bodies, at work, or in our homes? Us, sun-kissed flowers, picking, and we deserve so much better. But maybe if we were more rose than dandelion, it wouldn't be so quick to pick us and blow.
Yeah, let's take pictures.
More round for Kiyomi.
Wow. I should have known better than to go after that. How powerful and moving to the spirit and the soul. You bring in entertainment and history and facts and things that we should already be aware of and in touch with. But sometimes it takes someone to bring it out of you. When you see a performance like that, it really reaches deep inside you. Again, my name is Yusef Miller. I am the executive director of Activist San Diego. And my part of the presentation is a combination of President's Day and Black history. President's Day and Black history, and the relationship between the presidents and the Black community, and some other communities will be mentioned, but the relationship between the Black community and the presidents. Now, this is a long list of what's going on and what has been going on in this country. So forgive me if I have to take little peeks at my notes while these are going on. Now, I would like to start in any Black history event. I like to start that Black history doesn't start in America at all. It starts in Africa, the cradle of all civilization, the cradle of all human beings. Every human being breathing on the planet is an African, no matter what you think about yourselves or how far we go back. When you go far back enough, every human being is African. So we're all brothers and sisters in this room. We're all one family. Thank you. But I want to circle in and zero in on the particular struggle of one part of the family. And this part of the family came to this hemisphere from Western Africa, mostly Western Africa. Western Africa wasn't a place of slaves, just everyone's a slave. It was a place of Songhai, Mali. It was a place of Benin. All of these are kingdoms that existed and thrived in West Africa. Africa has the country of Egypt. And don't let anybody fool you. Egypt is right in Africa, right on the continent. The original inhabitants of Egypt are of African descent. We have the kingdoms of the Kushite, or as we know, the Ethiopian. We also have the kingdoms of the Nubians, which we call today Sudan and places like this. This is the long history of people of African descent, very complicated, very wondrous, and it's varied because the continent is so huge. But in a certain period of time, in the 1400s, late 1400s, people started being brought to the Americas, first to the Caribbean. And there's a place called, now it's called Haiti and Dominican Republic. That's when we first had the first introduction, stable introduction of people of African descent. In the early 1500s is when the first slave revolt happened. First slave revolt happened in the early 1500s. So there is a wonderful book called the 1619 Project. There's a wonderful book called the 1619 Project, but the 1619 Project is still 100 years later than the actual total event of Africans in the Western Hemisphere. It's a wonderful book. There's no shade on the book at all. But actually, in this hemisphere, Africans started coming in the early 1500s and actually had a slave revolt in the Dominican Republic at that time. So I set the stage to let us know that we're not talking about the history of enslaved people. No, we're talking about the history of people of African descent. And I want to make a distinction from that. None of us are slaves. None of us were born slaves. Enslavement was thrusted upon people. People are not slaves. So when we came to this hemisphere, now the 1619 Project book becomes relevant because it's the registry of the English-speaking oppressing world. So here we are in this hemisphere, and we are talking about Black history and the presidents. So I'll start with the first one, George Washington. George Washington, our first president, he was monumental to the history of this country. And they celebrate him all the time. I think he even has his own day, along with President's Day. And George Washington himself, he's a noted slave hunter and killer. He is a noted indigenous oppressor. He is a noted land speculator, and land speculators like a lot of land to do what? To make money. And what did he do to make money? Use to make money? Enslaved Black bodies. He had a lot of slaves, many, many slaves that he had, and they worked in the White House. Whenever the presidents entertained, they entertained all the time, especially the first ladies. The first ladies entertained all the time. Who did the first ladies use to service those people that were entertaining? Their personal slaves. Their personal slaves. There is a book out called The Ties That Bond. The Ties That Bond. This book is about first ladies and their enslaved people, the first ladies. So we want to be balanced, right? We don't just talk about the presidents in either good or bad fashion. If you're going to talk good about the presidents, you should talk good about the first ladies. And if you're going to talk bad about anybody, there were Karens before this modern Karen time. So these Karens back then you need to talk about. So she's one of those Karens. And then there's another book called They Were Her Property. Is a book about wealthy Southern women in enslavement. And it's by Dr. Stephanie Jones. So please look up those two books when you want to dig closer into what this aspect is when it comes to the first ladies and the women, the female aspect and contribution to oppression. So we have George Washington, the first president. And he, not only was he a slave owner, there was a way to signify that you were giving a slave a death sentence. And you didn't have to do anything. All you had to do was, from wherever you are, sell them down south. So if you're punishing a slave for running away too much and not working hard enough, if you sell them down south, they were harder on you. There's the upper south and the lower south. And they would be harder on you. If you still don't obey in the South, there's another death sentence. If they don't work you to death there. Selling you to the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, your life expectancy is 1 to 7 years in the Caribbean. They had so high of a turnover in the Caribbean, they had to constantly get influx of Black people because it was cheaper to work them to death and beat them to death than let them it was cheaper to do that than it is to maintain them. And it was cheap supply of Africans at that time. So his wife, Martha, she also had her own slaves. She came from a slave background and she had her own slaves. She had more slaves than him. And they had a huge plantation. The next president, John Adams. John Adams, he himself, he didn't have slaves. He didn't like slavery, but he did not care for Black people living around white people. He said, once you free a slave, if you're going to free him, get him out of this country, get him out, repatriate them back to Africa. Now, people have been here for a very long time in this continent. Where in Africa are you going to take them? Where are they from? It's kind of like what we do with the mass deportation. Everybody has a Latino name is not from Mexico. So this is what his idea was. And his wife, they all dismissed slavery. They didn't want slavery at all, but they didn't like the practice of Black people and white people mixing. So much so, when they see the play Othello, if you've never heard of the play Othello, look up the play Othello. There's a Black man and his Desmonda, how do you say her name? She was the love interest. And Miss Adams said seeing that sight made her stomach sick. Now, although she was one of those people who said no to slavery, she did not believe that Africans and Europeans should ever live together or work together, and especially not being in love. But love is love, because we are all one species. There's not a different species. We're human beings. There's only one race. There's no other race of human beings. But although we tout her and raise her up, she did some good things for emancipation, but what her real heart is that Black people shouldn't interact with white folks. Then we come to Thomas Jefferson. Everybody knows Tommy J. Thomas Jefferson and all the enslaved people that he employed, all the people that he had working on his farm, enslaved in his properties. Thomas Jefferson was afraid of Black people, terrified. He was terrified of Black uprisings. Why? I gotta put this down for this. Why? Because of Haiti. Because of Haiti. Haiti was the first free Black republic in this hemisphere. And he was afraid that revolution would come to America and infect his enslaved personnel. And what was he afraid they would do? Take off his head. If he was such a benevolent, kind, fatherly enslaver, then he wouldn't be worried about that. He had nightmares about this, and he did not want to see emancipation. He did not like slavery, according to him, but he didn't want to see emancipation either. He was saying it's like having a wolf by the ears. You dare not let him go, and you don't even want to hold on to him. It's like, what are you going to do? You're caught in the middle. But as we know about old Tommy J, he was a living, walking contradiction. He was a contradiction. He'll say one thing and do another. So some people say to me, oh, Yusef, you talk all this stuff, but you really need to know more and read more about Thomas Jefferson and what he did for against slavery. And he said, well, one of the things he did is he banned international slave trade. He was all supportive of that. International slave trade. This is true. He banned the international slave trade. He was supportive of that in 1807. He was a great supporter. But family and friends, please understand, he was from a slave state in Virginia. And if you can ban apples from overseas, you can now hire your price for the slaves or the apples that you sell in the United States. So the price for slaves went up, benefited his state. So his blocking of the international slave trade helped the internal slave trade thrive and be more expensive. Why am I saying this? He's from Virginia, right? Virginia is upper South. You talk about Mississippi, Louisiana, lower South. And the slaves, once they were banned from coming overseas, the upper South sold their slaves to the lower South. So this was a business transaction, not a transaction of humanity. It was not. And they say, Brother Yusef. Again, see, they usually talk to me about this man, so I'm explaining to you. They say, Yusef, well, the first draft of the Declaration of Independence came from him. And in that, he talked about the humanity of Black people. So you could tell his heart was changing. I tell you, read it again. Read it again. And you'll see what he's really saying, what he's actually saying. When you read it again, you can pull it up online. Thomas Jefferson, first draft of the Declaration of Independence. And when you read it again, you'll find his target audience is the King of England. And he's complaining to the King of England, how can you sell us slaves, then ask them to turn on us and cut our throats? That is what he was afraid of. He said, how can you take a person who was free and had his own humanity and things like this? He said, how can you do that to a person? They took that and said, he loves Black people. He said, how can you, King, take those people from their freedom, enslave them to us, and then gloss over that part right quick, and then ask them to kill us and turn on us? You are wrong. This was the theme of his whole part of his Declaration of Independence. And the part that's about African Americans. So when you look it up, now hopefully you'll look at it through a different perspective. And when you read it, you'll see what he was really after when he does that. And then one more. He said, oh, Brother Youssef, remember the Southwest Ordinance. He banned slavery in the Southwestern territory. Now, at that time, the East Coast was the only country we had. We didn't have the rest of the nation. It was only the eastern coast of this country. So actually, Southwest was actually where we would now call Illinois and places like this. This is the Southwest. So he made that. He said that there could be no slavery there. And we remember this language, no slavery except a person who was convicted of a crime. 13th Amendment, you know, it's going to come later. This is where they first had that language, but it was in the Southwest Ordinance. We got 5 states out of it. It was so huge, the area. 5 states out of the Northwest Ordinance. And he didn't put, he said there should be no slavery there. Why not? So he's a businessman. He's a land speculator. He's a businessman. If you have slavery in those areas that can also grow tobacco, that's what he grew. That's where his empire came from. That's where Virginia's empire came from. 2 things, selling tobacco and selling slaves to the Deep South. If some states come in and they can also have slavery, that's a competition for his tobacco industry. It's a competition also for his selling slaves down south. So when we really look at the details of why people do what they do, we owe Thomas Jefferson no thank yous. The only thank yous we owe is to ourselves. So let me restate that. We owe him no thank yous. And we owe the lion's share of the thank you to ourselves. Because I don't want to dismiss our indigenous brothers and sisters that helped out. I don't want to dismiss our white brothers and sisters that helped out. I want to dismiss them. But you should know the lion's share of what happened, and the savior of the African American, or the African at that time, we weren't African Americans, of the Africans was the African. So I spent enough time on Tommy J. Let me move on. He's a problem for me. So then, yes. So James Madison, he was a slaver too. And he owned over 100 slaves, James Madison. So as we see, as the founding fathers and the early signers of Declaration, the early presidents, we're on president number 4. We're on president number 4. And as we go on, we see that not only was James Madison an enslaver, also his wife, she's one of the biggest people that held the parties in the White House, and having her slave servants serve in the White House. James Monroe, he also owned slaves. And while he was in office, and he was big on emancipation, like he wanted to emancipate and he wanted to free, but he didn't want them to live together. He's another one that said, this could be free, but get out of town. You can be free, but we don't want you around here. And that's when James Monroe came up with Liberia. Liberia is a country in Africa. This country is populated by, now try to follow this, is populated by Africans raised in America, sent back to Africa. So they're African Americans, basically. So they started, and when they started, they named their capital city Monrovia because of President Monroe, James Monroe. That's why their capital is called Monrovia. And they sent him, he wanted to send everybody there because he's saying, if Black people are free, they shouldn't live here in this white man's country. This is his attitude. This white man's country. It's never been a white man's country. It has never been except for when the indigenous was here as the majority nation. There was never a single group that occupied, especially from Europe. Now, John Quincy Adams, he's the son of James Adams, John Adams, that I said they didn't participate in slavery at all, but they were against Black liberation. They were against Black socialization and wanted to get Black people out. And his wife, they also went to see Othello. Had the same reaction. They had the same reaction about Othello. Andrew Jackson. He's a Southerner. He was a Southerner, and he was also very authoritative. He didn't care about Black people. He didn't care about indigenous. He's the one that made the Indian Removal Act, moving enslaved indigenous from the east coast of this country into slave territory, and this was Oklahoma when they was moving there in the Trail of Tears. You might all know of it as the Trail of Tears. So this is Andrew Jackson, and when they did the Trail of Tears, here's something you might not know. Our indigenous brothers and sisters, and it's not about them, this is about the presidents, but our indigenous brothers and sisters also owned slaves, following the white Europeans trying to fit in with them. So when you have the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, and the Creek, they own slaves, chattel slaves, just like our indigenous, our white brothers and sisters, misguided brothers and sisters. They passed that misguidance on to them. And on the Trail of Tears, they were allowed to take their property with them. So on the Trail of Tears were enslaved Africans of the indigenous who also died on the Trail of Tears. There's several books on that, the invisible sort of hidden victims of the Trail of Tears. Martin Van Buren, he owned one slave. He only owned one slave, but he also supported the Indian Removal Act, and he opposed the expansion of slavery into the newly stolen territories to the west, from our indigenous brothers and sisters, but he didn't care that slavery existed in the South. So there's nothing for us to celebrate there. He doesn't want it to expand, but he doesn't want to get rid of it either. So this is his prospect on how he relates to the African Americans. He doesn't care. And when he doesn't care, those people who are for free soil, Abraham Lincoln was one of them, free soilers. They want the free soil to the West, but they don't want to get rid of slavery in the South. Now I'll start picking it up because I think I probably ate up some time here. So I want to skip, there's many, I won't skip their names though. William Henry Harrison, John Taylor, James K. Polk, all of them had, let's pause at James K. Polk. James K. Polk was one of the presidents that was trying to get the acquisition of Texas into the United States. And Texas was a slave colony. He wanted to get this slave colony and bring them into America as a slave state. So I always say, the greatest oppression of Black people in Mexico was the Tejas, the Texans. And when they came into the United States, they were also the greatest oppression of Black people as the state of Texas, all the way up into the Civil War. So the Texans, the Tejas, was always an oppression, the oppression of Black people. And they've done it all the way until they were part of the United States. And James K. Polk was the one helping them. I'll jump down a little bit, go back up to Zachary Taylor was the last president who owned slaves in office. While he was in office, that was Zachary Taylor. And he was not interested in ending slavery. He just didn't want it to expand. He himself owned 131 men, women, and children, and his wife managed these slaves. This year, he was president in 1849. We're still not at the Civil War yet. We're still not at the Civil War, 1849. So Millard Fillmore did not own slaves, but he did sign the Fugitive Slave Act. This is our relationship with him. And in that, someone was speaking about it earlier, Brother Clovis was speaking about that earlier, that even when the Fugitive Slave Act, once they escaped up past the Mason-Dixon line, they were not, even if they were Black and free and been free their whole lives up in the North, they would collect you anyway because they get money for it. So a lot of people were enslaved from the Fugitive Slave Act, even if they weren't a fugitive. So it was very harmful. And like I said before, at another gathering of our good people here, that the mass deportation is just like the Fugitive Slave Act because it looks at the color of the person, the ethnicity of the person, and say they've crossed some imaginary boundary and therefore they're a criminal. So if you crossed either from Mexico you're a criminal, or you cross from the Mason-Dixon line, you're also a criminal. Franklin Pierce, although like he didn't like own slaves in the White House himself, he was still morally opposed to slavery, but he wasn't committed to ending it. He's the one who authored the gag rule. He said, this is so much of a problem, talking about these Black people and their freedom and everything. It's the law now. It's a gag rule. If you speak about slavery, you're in trouble at the Congress, at the halls of government. So now we're getting to, that was Franklin Pierce. We're now at James Buchanan. Now we're getting close. Next, we'll talk about Abraham Lincoln. So he freed his slaves. He bought and freed his slaves. And he didn't like the expansion, but he was supportive of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which means that he was supportive of people being able to choose whether they could participate in slavery or not. You shouldn't be able to choose if you're going to oppress human beings or not. It shouldn't be a choice. But he's the one that presided over that time where we had the Kansas-Nebraska Act. In comes Abraham Lincoln. Trouble, right? Now comes trouble for the nation. We're talking about civil war is approaching. What was Abraham Lincoln's idea? Abraham Lincoln's idea was, and he was a free soiler, so you're going to understand the statement that he made. He said, if I could restore the Union without freeing any of the slaves, I'll do it. If I can restore the Union by freeing all of the slaves, I'll do it. And if I could free some and leave the rest alone, I'll do that too. So what did he care? He didn't care about Black people. He only cared about restoring the Union, which was his job as a president. But he lets us know where he fits in the history of Black America, is that he didn't care what you were going through, long as the Union is preserved. And he was a free soiler, like I said. A free soiler does not want expansion of slavery to the West, but they don't mind if it exists in the South. So while I'm on this topic right here, because we're about to go into the Reconstruction presidents after slavery, but on February 28th at the Peace Resource Center, I'll be doing a whole lecture on the Reconstruction era and the Redemption era and how that relates to today. What is Reconstruction? Reconstruction is the opportunity to get Black people educated, back to get proper health care and housing. This is after slavery. But then the redemption, when the South comes back in and says, cancel that, we're not doing any of that, we're going to KKK, Jim Crow, and all that kind of stuff. So the Redemption era undid the Reconstruction. So this is the talk that I'll have at 7 p.m. on February 28th at the Peace Resource Center. So if you're available, please attend that one as well. And it'll answer a lot of questions on how this is still the Reconstruction era. It is not over. We're still in the Reconstruction era. The time is 7 p.m. Thank you for that. 7 p.m. So after Abraham Lincoln, remember I told you that Tommy J just annoys me, right? I just have a lot to say about Tommy J. But yes. But the other one is Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was the president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Now, during Abraham Lincoln's time, the 13th Amendment was signed, abolishing slavery except for those who are convicted of a crime. That's what our incarcerated folks now face, where they can be enslaved to make license plate and furniture and stuff like that and paid pennies on the dollar, because they can have that because it doesn't go against the Constitution. You can have slavery if they're convicted of a crime. This is what our Constitution actually says. So the firefighters that fought the wildfires, pennies on the dollar. Some of them can boast like $1.05 an hour. Some of them can boast about $1.05 an hour. So Andrew Johnson, he said, that's far enough. 13th Amendment, far enough. The 14th Amendment, like Brother Clovis was saying, was equal protection under the law and citizenship rights, which is equal protection under the law. The 14th Amendment, he vetoed the 14th Amendment. He said, we're not giving Black people equal protection under the law. We're not making them citizens. And it also had birthright citizenship in the 14th Amendment, which they're trying to mess with now, right? So that is in the Constitution under the 14th Amendment. He said no. He said no. But the Congress, they overturned it. So therefore, we did pass the 14th Amendment. Then there was the 15th Amendment, voting rights. Unfortunately, these voting rights were for Black males, not Black females. At this time, the women's rights to vote would not become until 1920. And in the route to that, their white counterparts pushed the Black female counterparts to the side. And they went on to get their voting rights. And now they had to fight for all the way to 1960s. But I'll speak about that in a second. So Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson did not want citizenship and citizen rights for African Americans. So when people talk about, and this is my thing, when people talk about who's the worst president that ever lived, my top tier is Andrew Johnson, not Andrew Jackson. Remember, there were two Andrews, right? And they're both J's. Andrew Johnson. Yeah, because he was, huh? Well, I remember him another way, but it's not really that pleasant the way I use it, but it helps me remember who Johnson was because he acted like a Johnson. So so I remember Andrew Johnson because of his constant attack on the rights and the liberties of people of African descent. And he was the first president that they tried to impeach. After Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Johnson, we have Ulysses S. Grant. He owned one slave. Actually, his wife owned a couple too, but he owned one slave. And he kept his slave all the way up until the Emancipation Proclamation. And following the law of the land, he freed his slave. But he was a slave owner as well, Ulysses S. Grant. Now, in 1877, there is the election of Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford, now once the Emancipation Proclamation takes place and we have Reconstruction, we have the armies of the North and the South protecting the rights, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, which are the Emancipation Amendments. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment are the Emancipation Amendments. The 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment are the Emancipation Amendments. So in those rights, we had, and then part of that is that they disenfranchised the people who rebelled against the nation, the Confederate armies, the generals, and the leaders. They were all disenfranchised. They were taken out of office because they fought against the nation. And Black people were given rights. Now in the South, where some states had Blacks outnumber the whites because of the high slavery count, and now they're able to vote. You see a lot of Blacks in office, thousands of Black people in office. And I'm talking about in Congress, in Assembly, all these kind of things that Black people came up because we could vote for ourselves and vote for each other. So it was a really high exposure of Blacks. And I'm gonna talk about that more on February 28th. So what happened was in 1877, and this is going on, where Black people were being protected by the northern armies that stayed in the South after the Emancipation Proclamation and through these presidents. Rutherford B. Hayes, after the election, Fillmore, his opponent, had more electoral votes than Hayes. Hayes had more popular vote than his opponent. So what do? They're trying to say, who's the president? Who's the president? It's thrown up. It's supposed to be, once you have a tie or something like that, you're supposed to throw it to the Congress. They went to the back doors and they said, look, if you throw me the presidency, this is Hayes, Rutherford B. Hayes. If you just throw me the presidency, I'll do you a solid. I will remove the troops from the South. This is the compromise, the great compromise, the great betrayal from the African-American community, the great betrayal. He said, I will remove the troops from down South. All you have to do is throw me the presidency. And they did it. And he removed the troops from the South. And you can imagine what happened. All the Confederates came back into office. They stripped the African-Americans of their voting rights. They stripped them of all their privileges, then started murdering them for being free. There are stories of people being, blacks being shoved into barns and the barns burned down, all these kind of things. And that's why they call that era the redemption era, in 1877. And we're going to, like I said, the February 28th, we're going to go more in detail. So African Americans are dealing with this, fighting for survival because Rutherford B. Hayes betrayed the safety and security of Black families. And then Black families were not allowed to go to school anymore. They were not allowed to vote anymore with threat of death. And this period is when the KKK first came out, and the red shirts. There were a lot of other paramilitary white supremacy groups. KKK is just the most popular. Those things, Jim Crow, Black codes, all of them started getting enshrined, especially in the South. The North was not immune to it. We had Jim Crow and Black codes in the North too, but they were serious. It was part of their culture and lifestyle in the South. So all of these things are taking place. Now, African Americans have fought for those and died for those rights of the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. And that was in the 1860s when the Civil War happened. It wasn't until the 1960s that we could actually actualize those things. 100 years. It took us 100 years to work on that. Remember, Martin Luther King Jr. was not fighting for the right to vote. We had the right to vote constitutionally. He was fighting for the government to enforce the right to vote to African Americans. That's what he was fighting for. He wasn't fighting for the right to vote. We already had that 100 years earlier. And the right to use public pools, go to public libraries, live where we had that right 100 years earlier. The civil rights movement had to struggle and force and say enough is enough and fight and push those items to the front. So when we see that voting rights are under attack now, we see that your registration can be cut off. You'd have to have IDs to register. All of those were taxes they used in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. That's what they used at that time. And the attack on people of color who are in office, especially if they're assembly or their Congress, mayors and things like that, to root them out was something that happened in the 1800s. And they were really successful with it by changing voting laws, simply changing voting laws. So what I'm seeing today is and it's been going on for since that time, is the continuation of Reconstruction, trying to get people proper health care. You would think in 1860, we weren't talking about proper health care? We were. Affordable health care is not 2000s. It is not 1900s. It is 1800s. Education, free education, an affordable education, 1800s. The right to vote, labor rights. People say, oh, you know what? We need to form labor and get labor together. Oh, that's a great idea. 1800s. And if you want to see where all that was embodied for the most part, please look up the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau was responsible for making sure that not only poor Blacks, poor whites, displaced whites from the Civil War, that they got affordable education, affordable health care. They disputed on labor contracts and and housing. So that is the platform. When you look at the Freedmen's Bureau, and we'll talk about this more on the 28th, when you look at the Freedmen's Bureau, that is the platform for the party at the time. The party at the time was Abraham Lincoln's party, which was Republican, but they were liberal in the 1800s. And the party of disenfranchising people to vote, monetizing healthcare only for specific people, and all of that other, the antithesis of that was the conservative party. Now, when I talk about parties, liberal and conservative, I'm talking about social party. I'm not talking about economic party. There are some people who are economically conservative and some people who are economically liberal, but we're talking about socially liberal and socially conservative. And the social conservative movement has been the same since the 1800s, even if they've changed their name. They've been the exact same. And the things we're fighting for in the liberal party has been the same. There's been some add-ons, but we've never taken away from what the Liberal Party is. So you might be surprised to know that the Freedmen's Bureau was fighting for labor contracts for Black people and others. You might be surprised that they both fought for healthcare reform and education reform. You might be surprised that in the 1860s. But we're past 100 years past and we still have the same platform. So you know who is who. Now, I'll stop with that. And I know there's supposed to be question and answers if you have any. You might not have any, but I'll pause here and allow everyone to absorb that. I know it was a ton of stuff, right? It was huge. I should have asked you guys to bring a pad and a pencil, but I didn't. But I'm glad that you guys are here and to hear that. And these are the kinds of information that people are missing in people's history books. They're not put in those history books. It's glossed over, and it is a romanticizing of our history. But our history has a beautiful side of America. Beautiful, absolutely. And then there's an underbelly. The underbelly cannot be dismissed for the sake of the beauty of this nation.
Yeah, well, take a stack. Yeah. Come on up and come up to the microphone. Yeah, you got to come up to the mic.
Oh, that's, I know everybody usually can hear me, but yeah, I actually have a question for you, Brother Yusuf. Looking at history of our presidents, the beginning, the middle, and the end, figuring out the math, which one would you say were the greatest allies with the indigenous people, with our Black brothers and sisters and our Hispanic, basically, the true value of what we are, an immigrant country?
Okay, so the way I'll answer that question is this. It's complicated to say who, one person, but there was an era that things started to change. And this era is in combination with the Great Depression. So we have Hoover, not J. Edgar Hoover, President Hoover. There are two different Hoovers. J. Edgar Hoover was over the FBI. President Hoover, he presided over the Great Depression, the beginning of the Great Depression. And he got voted out of office because of the Great Depression. And some say it was unfair, it wasn't his fault, but anyway, he got out. Then we get our president, FDR, thank you. FDR comes in. When FDR comes in, he's the longest serving president ever because the 2 terms wasn't law yet. So he actually died in office on his 3rd term because it wasn't law. 4th term. Okay, 4th term. Thank you. On his 4th term. He was elected, but he didn't finish his 4th term. He finished 3 terms. He was elected for his 4th term. And he died in office. But here's the thing. When he came into office, this is called the Civil Rights era. Not the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights era. And this is the era when the nation had no choice but to lift from the bottom. So everybody's in the Great Depression. Now you have to offer jobs. You have to, make public work so people can get to work. You have to do all these kind of things. And African Americans benefited. Our indigenous brothers benefited. Now, he had a problem too when it came to the internment of, when it came to the Mexican repatriation. Yeah, there's a problem. So how can I say any one, right? So each group will have to speak for themselves on which one is good. But the turning point for the African American was FDR. And then after FDR, other presidents started following it, all the way up to Eisenhower. They started following this civil rights era, making freedom for Blacks to join the federal workforce, Blacks to be in non-segregated military and things like this. So this era was going all the way, and FDR was a Democrat. The Democrats were the party of slavery. But here's a Democrat helping out people of color with these programs. People started to migrate. So we'll talk about that more. We're gonna talk about that more on Friday the 28th, right? How that worked out. But this is just a teaser, right? After FDR, you'll see people of color migrate towards the Democratic Party, and conservative ideas, socially conservative ideas, migrate out of the Democratic Party. So this is the turning point that I would speak of. As there's not one person that I could mention, not even my beloved Barack Obama, not even him. The seat is a presidency. The person who sits on the chair, they have to abide by the chair, not by themselves. You know what I mean? So his hands was tied on a lot of things. He imposed and supported a lot of immigration problems, you know what I mean? Issues like that. And it was unfair that people thought that he was the savior of Black America. He is not and was not the savior of Black America. He can't be. You can't do it in the presidency. So, you know, my hat's off to him, but I thought it was unfair that people pointed at him as the savior of Black America, and racial America is now abolished and over because we had a Black president. So the question is more broad than that. It's not a single person. It's an era.
Thank you, Yusuf. I have a question, but I gave some people some upcoming dates, and there's a couple things I forgot. So take your phone out again. On the fourth Friday of every month, our Saving Lives in Custody campaign, North County for Equity and Justice, Activist San Diego, and Moms Against Torture join Cheryl Canson of Treat Me, Don't Mistreat Me at a courthouse rally that starts at noon. So Friday, February 28th. That is going to be the blackout day. So we're going to not spend any money. We're going to meet down the courthouse rally and support her, and maybe then hang out in Balboa Park and spend the day together. And then in the evening, go hear Yusuf. Yusuf, my question for you is, so I kind of have a theory that the Civil War never actually ended. And part of it is because there's people who lost who don't think they lost, right? And Yusuf is one of the most kind and polite, gentle, but with righteous people I know. How do we even communicate with people white supremacists who think that they won this, that they won, or that they're still winning, or they're gonna win, when, was that ever settled, or how, we're in this period of, I don't know, how do you approach that?
Well, I think you're talking about the lost cause myth, where the South, they don't admit to any wrongdoing. They blame the North for being the aggressors and the war between the states. They don't even call it the Civil War. They call it the war between the states. And when somebody uses certain terminology, you know where they're coming from. When they say the war of Northern aggression or the war between the states, they're pro-Southern when in the battle for the Civil War. So now the Southerners think that after the Civil War, such great oppression was put on the South from the wicked and immoral North. And I do not disagree with them. The North was problematic as well. They were self-serving, even in their support of people of African descent. They were self-serving, but it doesn't exonerate them for what they did in the South. So they do have this myth that there was the happy slave, they weren't oppressing anyone, that they were only fighting to protect their homeland and all these kind of things. It was actually a constitutional crisis where the states rebelled from the Union. Now, states have rights under the Union, not the right to leave the Union. So they don't accept that idea, though. They think that if you have tyranny, that you can break away as a state. But our Constitution doesn't allow that, nor do the Articles of Confederation allow that. None of those papers or none of those documents allow the secession of a state or states away from the Union. The Union is supposed to be in total and forever. In total and forever. You can't come in halfway into the United States. You have to come in Union totally and forever. And this is what that was about. So our brothers and sisters who are misguided in the South, that think that the South has been wronged and they've been betrayed in some areas, in some aspects, they have a point. But when it comes to the moral fight of it, they don't. Only some of the economic fights they do. But in the moral fight, they don't. Did you have something, bro? Yes, you may.
Do this in front of the speaker because it'll cause feedback. I'm going to disagree with my brother Yusuf just a little bit on that. One, Constitution, like every contract, is exactly that, a contract. It's an agreement, right? There are laws that say you're supposed to do stuff, but those are agreements between human beings. And if you and I get together and we have an agreement and you do something that I think violates the agreement, I have the right to withdraw from that agreement. I, as a sovereign human being, always have the right to self-determination. Now, it might be me breaking the contract by imposing that because you and I have an agreement, right? But I mean, we can look at the United Nations. We can look at the CHO. We can look at NATO. All those are agreements, right? And at any point, the folks can say, I don't like that agreement, no. Right? Now, in civil society, we negotiate our way out of an agreement in civil society. The other answer I would give to that question is, how do we have a conversation with somebody who has a different belief system than us? Find common ground. Inclusion. There's an old poem somebody taught me. It said, he drew a circle to keep us out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But I and love had will to win. We drew a circle and brought him in. We drew a larger circle that's inclusive of the other folks who are there. They think they're thinking outside of our thinking. But just like I was saying earlier, we have a whole lot more in common than we have in difference. If we can find that common ground and have a conversation starting there, especially if we talk about basic humanities, try talking about that to that person about their children. What do you want for your children? So then why do you want something different for my children? Right? That kind of thing. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Brother Clovis. And the bottom line, constitutionally, no one has the right to secede from the Union. That's why we went to war. They don't have the legal right. But I thank you for that perspective. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Sure. Yeah, because the people online can't hear you if you don't use the mic. Oh, okay.
So several thousand of us were out there on the street today, thinking about what does Black History Month tell us? What are the lessons that we should learn from the civil rights movement as we face the biggest challenge really since the Civil War? And particularly, I'd like you to think, since every movement needs a vision, needs a North Star, you know, in the context of the third Reconstruction, you know, for what this country needs, the transformation that we need, how does all of this inform where we're going and how we're getting there?
The struggle is long and the struggle is old. It's as long as this country's history, North America, and it's a continued fight that we will not succeed unless we all do it together. So the lessons that we can learn starts from, and this is not a brag or a boast, this is just a fact of the matter. The lessons that we learn are from the struggle of the African American. You have to look at the voting rights struggle of the African American, where you live, the living rights of the African American, the school rights of the African American, and they weren't meant for African Americans only. It just widened the concept of our nation to other people besides rich, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, heterosexual males. This, the job, or what African Americans did, was expand that United States flag over everyone and not just some of us. But what we took to get there, we bled, we died, we cried, and other people along with us. Healthcare. There was, you know, everybody knows about Roe v. Wade, how, you know, I'm sorry, Roe v. Wade. Everybody knows about Brown versus Board of Education. Everybody knows about Brown versus Board. Brown versus Board was not the only time where we had to get equal treatment in an institution. We also had another one for the medical institution, where Black people couldn't go to the same medical, and people were dying because their hospitals were so far away, their emergency rooms were so far away, they would die in the route of getting there. Also, the rights for housing, fair housing. Fair housing is because of the the track record of the African American. This is not a brag or a boast, but you have to see from the bottom, what did it take for them to get where they are today? So I would say everyone needs to be accustomed with and draw from the lessons learned from the struggle of the African American, and therefore everyone else that has been impacted in this country. Lotus?
And of course I can't keep quiet. I told you I'd trip over it one day at some point. February 28th. Good idea. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted how long? 381 days. One day will not break the back of these major corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations. How did they do that? They organized. They organized. Organizing is not a haphazard, fly-by-night, throw-together process. I used to be a community organizer. I can speak from experience. The second thing is, go back to my primary mantra, they were led by the spiritual people in their communities. That's a
right.
lesson we can learn.
That's right. Yes. You have to come to the mic.
So. Thank you. So one thing that I find so treacherous and upsetting, and we have seen this again and again and again. Sorry, I can hear them say hi, honey. Okay. So one of the things that I've noticed, and I think we all have noticed, is the last time Trump was in office, BLM blew up and it was wonderful. Right now, we're having the same problem. But we're going to turn it into a success. And that's what I heard coming from both of you. Why are we constantly having our government attack our Black brothers and sisters? It's killing me. And it has happened to my Hispanic brothers and sisters too. But this is President's Day and Black History Month. So.
Okay. Okay. So in this nation, in the Western Hemisphere, has what I call a particular hatred of people of color, particularly Black people, a particular hatred, especially for African Americans. Why do I say that? There are Africans who are Afro-Caribbean or African from Africa, where they will inform them that at least you're not African American. We can't stand those guys, you know? So it's a particular hatred for people of African descent. And it's built in systemically in the functions of this nation. We have to weed it out. So the nation was designed to oppress people of color, and particularly people of African descent. So we will continue to fight as long as that system is designed to work that way. And it'll take all of us, even if, let's say if every single Black person united to change this thing, it wouldn't still succeed. Why I say that? Because I know math. And we are only a certain percent of the country. We need support from righteous white people. We need support from righteous brown people, righteous Asians, because numerically speaking, you cannot win in a silo. So like Brother Clovis said earlier, it takes organizing, it takes recognizing the system and the way it's supposed to work and reform that and fix that so that we can advance forward. So that's why it's always attacking people of color, because it was designed to always treat people of color that way, and it is enculturated into the nation.
Thank you. So I got three quick ones. One, the ultimate challenge to white supremacy is Blackness. And we can take that back thousands of years. Some of those books had some of that information in it. Two, if you read the Bible, there's a book called Judges. And in the book of Judges, there's these guys that come up to help to save the country, and then things happen. Virtually every other chapter in that book starts with this phrase. And the people did what was right in their own eyes. So I go back to my mantra. We can start with quantum physics and bring it all the way down to human beings and a whole lot of other stuff, the structures we put together. But when we go back to the Kemetic perspective, we go back to history, we go back to our understanding of everything. There's structure to everything. And there's a thing called karma, a thing called law of cause and effect, right? What would happen in the Jewish nation was that somebody would come and rescue them from their enemies, and they'd get complacent, and they'd sit back and let things go to pot. And the primary thing they did that was contrary to what they had been taught from day one as a nation was they stopped believing in their own God, they stopped praying to their own God, they stopped being responsive to their own God, and they stopped dealing with the earth and people as if there was a God. So I go back to my mantra: spiritual leadership. People who see and know and understand how things actually work behind the scenes. Maybe we need quantum physicists to lead us, but we need people who understand how these things work behind the scenes. Because if I can say to a lot of people who call themselves Christians in my context and say, you need to be praying for Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Pray that God changes their hearts, right? That God changes what they do, what they say. Because those folks who are listening to them aren't going to listen to us right now until we make that connection, until we use that energy to connect to one another and we begin to have that conversation. Hey, how are your kids doing? My kids are doing it good, except for that guy you voted for. You got your kids going to college. He don't want my kids to go to college. Why is that? Explain that, right? When you start making those connections, right, you have people who understand how those connections work, things will start to transform. It's not likely to start from the top down. That's not what happened in Israel, right? We as people have to connect to each other and imbue our nation with a spiritual energy like the civil rights movement did, right? That will transform our nation and the globe, by the way. As you can see, it's not just here, it's everywhere.
So just in a very, very practical side of the situation, in my community, most of the people where I live at is Black people. I have already like around 5 years trying to connect, and I certainly have the spiritual part, and as much as we can recognizing everybody's different that way, and we can all connect. So, but it's been so tough on me in the practical side. What would you recommend me as a part of 100 units apartment that I've been trying to call out to get organized? Because I see this situation in the American history that I mean, you guys as Blacks has a very specific suffering, and we as Hispanics have another kind of suffering struggle. But at the end of the story is everything that is not white, right? So I feel that way, and I think, for example, what happened in Texas that you say, how we as Mexicans, we are not even in the history. We're not even mentioned. All the clans or the people that were living there were not even mentioned because they literally diluted us. We were less than us because we were already here. They didn't want us. And at a certain point, I see in the Black history that they were taking you guys, at least, I don't want to be rude and don't misunderstand me, but at least you guys were merchandise. We were a piece of trash, something on the way to make their richness. We were not even a merchandise. So we're not even there. And that's what I try to tell the people when I want to connect, but I still feel in a very strong way this boundary. Even though when I look at their eyes and I'm talking to them, they can be very nice. They can come out to my call, sign a paper, but this gathering together is a struggle still. I don't know how to do it. What would you recommend me? What in the very practical side of the organizing people activity would you recommend?
I would recommend for people coming to congregation with Black people, I would say one of the biggest places to do it is the church. Black people go to church. There's a lot of Black people in church, and to fellowship in church is a whole different dynamic. A lot of guards are dropped down, a lot of spirituality. And outside of church, the main thing, and you can learn from us the way we organize here, Food. Food is universal. When you invite people to organizing meetings and you have food and you have, you show respect and dignity to one another, but you have food, people come to food, So it's like the universal organizing tool is food. So I would say if you're in an apartment complex with 100 apartments or whatever, and there are local Black community institutions, the main institution being the church, I would go there. And I mean, I know you probably have your own church, right, that you go to, but I know from my Christian brothers and sisters, I'm not Christian, so I'm just throwing this part out there, that they visit each other's churches, and it's not like an offense to anybody. Visit a Black church, get to know the community through the church. And I think that will be a good leg up, foot in the door. Mm-hmm.
First of all, don't limit yourself to I would say this, don't limit yourself to Black churches, don't limit yourself to churches. I would articulate it this way. And this is work you have to do. It's 381 days was the bus boycott. That took a lot of work. You've seen the images of guns, dogs, hoses on children, right? It's going to be work. It's difficult work. It's painful work. I would articulate it this way. Find a faith leader of vision. Find a faith leader and that's research you'll have to do. You have to go to their websites. You have to go to their churches. You have to call them and make an appointment and sit down and talk with them if they'll actually meet. Find a faith leader of vision and work from there.
I know where you could find a couple faith leaders, maybe some Black faith leaders that maybe will go with you. Perhaps you can invite one of them out. So as we wind down, first let's give a round of applause to Kiyomi and her team, choreographer team, to Clovis and to Yusuf, and to all of you for being here tonight, and for everyone who stuck it out for a very long day. We have been on the news quite a bit today. So when you go home, do some Google San Diego news protest, and you'll find quite a few pieces about us. And I want to end with an ask. And that ask is, if you're not yet a member of Activist San Diego, membership involves a contribution of $24 or more for the year. And that gives you the privilege to vote in the fall for our board elections, and to run for the board member if you'd like. And you can, of course, give more than $24 a year. You can also divide it up into smaller monthly contributions. But Activist San Diego is volunteer run, scrappy, funded by the love of the community, and with a lot of us who work our tails off, do so for the love of the community. So we are happy to give.
And your membership helps show your commitment to the movement too. Thank you.
Yes, and when we go advocate, we get to say how many people we're representing. And so I think with that, we're gonna end the live stream. We're gonna close out. I think everyone's pretty exhausted, so we're gonna I'll help put chairs away if you'd like, but get phone numbers from each other, connect with each other. And stay tuned into activistsandiego.org. And we will look forward to building power together and continuing towards liberation for all. All power to the people.